everybody, and we're back. It feels like it's been ages. It really does, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So we're doing episode 4.
Yeah, so it's the episode, what, video, just towards the window of the Jane chat, and I'm sure
Hi, Wen.
and I'm sure the audience will be out about the happening. And so just before we get into the episode, then great, you shall look at what are your general thoughts on this episode?
I think it's very clever how it does the characters. I think they're the most interesting thing in this episode because you can see it's sort of a slow turning of a wheel almost when it comes to how certain characters are being treated or seen. And I think once again that sort of evolution of Dot is also in here, but it's not as much as last week.
Yeah.
And you sort of see some things that were sort of very small threads at the beginning of this series now become a lot more important. So this is definitely a character. I'd say this isn't so much of a big explosions or that sort of it's not a big set piece episode. There's a lot of character work here.
Yeah. And how and how what to the resident Joker in the chat, I'm sure you have I'm sure you have plenty of jokes to say as the review progresses.
Oh, he's our Matthew. We will.
Mhm. Yeah, so the episode starts off and it's almost and it's almost like deficit and it's almost kind of like meditation technique and taking bit and but I obviously for AC well and cheek I know once in a pole and G off.
Yeah. Well, before she even gets in the room, it's a really well shot scene, isn't it, of her just arriving at AC-12. And sort of when I was watching it again today, you very much get this sort of, it's almost the Wicked Witch has come. Do you know that sort of vibe of just she's this sort of very lone figure just striding in, and everybody looks at her, and you just sort of get this feeling of, like I said, the Wicked Witch is here, or like the Ice Queen has arrived, and it's a very good intro, and you just think, oh God, she's here. Like, what's she gonna do? Because why would she even want to set foot in this building again? Sort of vibes before you even get to the meeting.
And so as predicted, the meeting with an absolutely brilliant and it's the best outcome of.
Well, yeah, she arrives in the room and it's just Ted, and Ted looks like he would be anywhere else, like literally anywhere else on the planet, than be in a room with her. And Jill's also there, which I think later on you see she has a lot to do this episode actually, but just her being here, you're starting to see her sort of role. And she sort of says, doesn't she, is like, I'm the legal sort of representative, and even then Denton's got a very smart aleck comment of, oh, they must give you a lot to do. Which is quite a funny little one-liner from Denton, and then they sit down. And so Jill then says, as part of like a scheme, this is like restorative sort of, I don't know what the term was. It was like, yes, it was very much like something big has happened. She's in this building. But it's this sort of idea of reconciliation, wasn't it, between her and AC-12 was the so-called purpose of the meeting.
Yeah. And basically, the way Joey's about, and the basic, yeah, he wants the process of after sort of being explained to and basically, yeah, I suppose if you want to call
Yeah,
it,
it's sort of to make her happy, to make her feel like she can move on. Is the sort of the speak, isn't it? But as soon, like I said, you know Denton's here, so you know she's got something planned up her sleeve. And she even starts straight off because when Ted gets asked, like, do you have anything to say? Will you apologize? Ted just says nothing. And then you can see that sets her, sort of puts her to, you can see as soon as that happens, she's like, right, I'm not going to get what I want unless I do something.
Yeah. And she came in. Well, Canadians on.
Well, yeah, but like I said, this is in stages. This is what's good about this scene. You've got her entrance, you've got Ted refusing at the beginning, and then she says, doesn't she? Why's only him here? Like, they all did me an injustice. I want all of them here.
And so his thing was to find on it for and so now the three of them and and so as goes from us it goes and so and 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 so yeah and she capitalizing on it him careful and James but doesn't he he doesn't say anything. He
Well, no,
doesn't
he
say
does.
anything at all.
He doesn't apologize. He basically says to her, I didn't tamper with the evidence, and you're using the sexual conduct charge because that's a hot topic. It would basically it would get what you wanted. You used that on purpose against me. So he bites back. He doesn't beat like Ted was silent. Steve bites back.
And the whole of the film he's finished the it's not when it goes and it goes even and actually you like father is sort of father is sort of
Yeah, he's like, Stephen, please just shut up and just say what you have to this woman is the vibe, isn't it, from Ted? Because she also she does try with Kate as well without any success. But you can see she's purposely, when it comes to Steve, there's a personal edge to it. So she gets nothing out of them all, and then that's when she plays her trump card. And most of us, and probably the chat was similar. We knew she'd have something. To sort of, that's her MO. She always has something on somebody, or she always gets the upper hand somehow.
So it's essential here a copy of her on and gathering on on its many any sort of eating stuff in the house
But she doesn't say what it is.
Yeah.
She just says, I've got this on my phone. And then as soon as I think Steve's reaction tells it all, and the fact that she says to him, doesn't she? And then, like I said, it's very much Denton. She goes, do you want me to play it? And he's like, no. So as soon as he says no, they all look at him. And I think pretty much people watching it probably will have the same thought of, what have you done? why do you not want that being played?
Actually, I mean, actually, and so essentially, it's kind of public number one, public enemy number one throughout this entire episode.
Yes. Well, it's sort of stages. Just everybody had to go at him at some point in this episode.
Yeah.
Because obviously, Kate literally marches off as soon as it's Denton does her very. I'm very pleased, like, with the outcome of this.
Oh Jesus!
Okay, now I'm singing that in my head.
Oh man, you're gonna get us cancelled.
Oh come on! Considering the comment he said about Tesco and the head last week.
Yeah, and yeah, and to the comment and
yeah, that's tame for Matthew. Come on.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Kate waltzes out when Denton's basically at the end going, "Oh, I'm very happy," and like I've had, and then Ted just properly balls at Steve. There's no other word for it. He just explodes. To basically say, like, what have you done? Like that sort of vibe of, and Steve, in typical Steve fashion, doesn't back down. He sort of snaps back.
And it says to after the split, Sarah don't exchange your private one.
Oh, but that's it. But Ted's response is interesting.
It says I'm ignoring them.
And then Steve looks at him like, yeah, like, what are you getting at? And I think that shows the guilty conscience of Ted playing up, because Steve wasn't pointing towards his marriage. And the fact that Ted blurted, I'm a married man. It's like, oh, you are feeling guilty, aren't you, about something? And in this episode, you see later on what he's feeling guilty about. But because Steve basically, in his response, says, I didn't tamper with the evidence. That's what he's repeating a lot. So it's that then of, okay, so you're denying that. What did you actually do relationship-wise with this woman? You're not backing away from that so much.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good point. Jacket is the whole dance probably is not a lot when the episode is airing. So that
and here's the thing, he's a good-looking bloke, so he's not like he'd struggle. I'll say this from a female perspective.
Yes, you know that you can't seem Charlotte. That's where was the
Alright, it's just the next time we talk about Who and I'll bring up your girlfriend list from Doctor Who, and then we'll be even, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so after Ted sort of chews him out and has a proper fit at him, then Jill. And this is an interesting scene with Jill with Ted afterwards in Ted's office.
And so the expense begins a person and it was if the now I'm not gonna I'm not gonna but that makes me I wasn't expected and
Well, it just proves a point of, like, she's left and she's done her damage. That's basically what Jill's saying without saying it. Like, she's left the building, which, like I said, this is how impactful Denton is and how explosive she is. So after she's had that, she then talks about more of what's happened in that interview. Well, it was an interview in that session.
She basically says she basically says Eve should um Eve should essentially do the same because the AC because the AC always put his foot on it. They should go in a very big way. So to and so and that must be together and or a suspension and so they shouldn't.
Yeah, and that's she's sort of saying
Mm-hmm.
it's because it's sort of, like I said, sexual relations that it's such a big thing.
Oh yeah.
And but then considering Ted completely bowled at him and was incredibly furious at him in that room afterwards, he does
He
defend him
was
here.
still he was still very protective because he said as to how it can be another treatment. Should be as to sort of job in this apartment or however they phrases it.
Yeah, and she's also got an interesting line that she does say to him, like, you feel responsible for him because you recruited him. So she is
Oh
that. I do think the show has loosely been almost saying like a father son
yeah.
in some aspects with Ted and Steve, because
Mm-hmm.
like in the vein of Ted is sort of the one who will put Steve down when he's getting a bit too hot headed. He will make him think a bit more. So he's almost is a bit of a father role to him. And she basically calls this out and says you're personally attached. That's why you can't let him go. But yeah, no. So that's an interesting thing because that comes up again later on. And then we see Kate's reaction, which I'm interested in how you felt about Kate's reaction.
She's kind of a hypocrite, no, in a sense, because I know get to this, so and we'll get to this later on in the reviews, but even when you found out about the year she had to with the Richard Baker's I've been for the second series in yellow, el pot kettle you were hard to saying either and
Yeah, no,
so
it's
yes,
interesting because
yeah,
he even brings that up when he's trying to like speak to her. He's like, "Well, I had your back." Is the vibe I get from
yeah,
one he does say to her with that. Can you just trust me here that I didn't do what she says? And Kate is
yeah,
very much not believing him. And I actually thought that watching it again, I think she is a bit harsh, and it sort of adds to that, like we were saying in series two, that she's nowhere. She's had her moral issues, and I think it's the
yeah,
fact that was to do with cheating and to being with doing something that you shouldn't with somebody else, and that's basically what she thinks Steve has done,
yeah,
and she's quite angry. Like you can tell this is
yeah,
really, and I think that also explains her actions for the rest of this episode.
yeah.
But
So it's a bit sort of so it's a bit sort of hypocritical. It's really it's it's obviously the way you've seen this episode years before. When I have do you have a sort of reaction to that?
I can remember
Yeah.
feeling she was a bit harsh. She was a bit
Mm-hmm.
harsh to Steve because yes, he's an
Yeah.
idiot. Yes, he's got an issue in the past, but
Mm-hmm.
Steve has proven that he will back her, and I think that's what it feels like
Yeah.
to me. More of it's less of the hypocritical nature. It's more of he clearly needed somebody at his to be his support here or to be one of the few people on his side, and
Yeah.
she was very quick to not do that. Whereas Steve,
Mm-hmm.
in multiple occasions, whether that's keeping that secret, whether that's letting her stay at his house for a night when her husband locked her out. He has done multiple things
Yeah.
to sort of show that he's very trusting, and she's sort of chucking that a bit back, I think, at his face. Especially with how quickly she's then to sort of sidle up and team up with Dot. But we'll get into that later on. But I think the reason, and her sort of explanation in that scene to Steve is she feels betrayed that he didn't let her in on his plans. I think that's what, from her side, if we were to try and argue from her viewpoint, that's where the anger's come from. And that she feels like she can't work with him because he's always going off doing these sort of like crazy, almost very stubborn things without getting anybody else involved.
The chat kind of like agrees with me on this. That basically he was a hypocrite, and what is Matthew said? That's the big something novel.
Yeah, don't say that out loud on stream.
Yeah, I won't.
Matthew, you can't get the stream cancelled, mate. But yes, God. With Steve, it would make sense. But yeah, so in the chat also, I think it's fair to just have a moment to say rest in peace, Bob.
It used to be we have a moment, rest in peace, Bob. After Bob, we created media and various other characters throughout the history who show condolences to nation for who the lost another legend.
Yeah, it's been the year for it, so rest in peace, and we will all. Your creations are so beloved, so rest in peace, Bob. Hopefully, now you can rest, like we said. Hello, Script Doctor. Like we've got a few joining, so hello everybody who's just popped in the chat.
And so hello to everybody, right? So and then Harry gets called in to do and we're sort of all weapon all weapon of the as we find that who even the odd and who gave him the order who gave him the order getting
yeah, there's a lot goes on in this scene or this interview, isn't there? Because he starts off with saying he's been framed, and another point is Dot isn't in the interview. It's Steve and Ted doing the interview. Dot and Kate are listening and watching in another room, so you see Dot's reactions throughout the whole of this, which are fascinating. So he starts off with saying he's been framed, and they sort of all say, like, really, like, do you really think you're going to sort of trick us into that? And they don't believe his story about what we know happened, which is Dot hit himself. So you're sort of seeing Dot's. This is more proof that Dot's trick, his sort of mask he's playing, the sort of character he's pretending to be, is working, because they don't even comprehend the idea that Dot is lying about that.
Yeah.
So, and then they start to ask him about the phone calls and who was he calling at certain nights, and then he clams up and he's silent. He just has no comment for a few questions when Matt gets brought up, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And then Ted basically points out how much evidence there is pointing to him and basically how screwed he is.
Yeah. So Hastings basically says the evidence is going to shake him on. Oh.
Yeah, so that then it's almost like that shakes Harry, you can see, and then he starts to talk again, and he basically says, "I don't know." Hi, Stucker. He basically says, "I don't know a lot about who was on the phone, other end of the phone. They did tell me to kill Danny, so we now know that Danny was ordered to be killed. It wasn't Harry's personal issues or their own beef. It was Danny knew too much, or he knew enough that it got him killed." So we learn that from this interview as well.
Yeah. So essentially, they end, but ends up about the South Pole about the South Pole and accent, because that's the only thing that Harry can identify as the South Pole and accent. It doesn't know who was on the other end of the phone.
No, and so that's a tiny bit of info which they've now got on what it turns out to be the caddy. They're not quite at this point focusing on that, but it's a key bit of information, isn't it, that comes up later.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then once we've sort of got that, like I said, and Dot is watching the whole of this, and you can see he's absolutely breaking it. Like he's so nervous, and that's the acting of Craig. That's Craig once again showing how good he is in that scene. It's fast. Like I said, it's so interesting to watch him.
Yeah, his expressions are priceless.
Yeah, because you can see he's just waiting to see if anything gives him away. And luckily, he's disguised his tracks enough at this point that nothing's pointing to him.
Yeah.
So now we go back to Joe, who was, if people don't remember, one of the boys from Sans View where Danny was, and one of the abuse victims.
So essentially, and he basically decides to go on trash. He basically decides to go on trash and because because all this of in his past has been ate up and so it's quite traumatic for the Harry.
Yeah, and also I don't know if we knew about this already, but the building's been converted to apartments.
Yeah.
So I think it's the fact that it's being used for another purpose that also gets him. That it's sort of gonna almost get away with the secrets and the darkness and become something new that they can just not talk about the past. Almost is the vibe I get a bit as well.
Yeah.
So then, of course, the police arrive, and then he gets an interview. He talks with Kate for the first time. Actually, this is the first time Kate's talked to him with Steve there.
I'm sorry.
Oh, what's Matthew said?
Matthew, I'm sorry.
What photo fit? Where's the photo fit? What are you even referring to? Matt, you're gonna have to explain it in the chat without if it's spoilers. Be careful, but I can't even remember a photo
What?
fit right now.
What the hell is he? Yeah. Oh, Matthew, I'm quick.
Broken Daniel. You've broken Daniel, Matthew. We're only half an hour into the stream, folks. This is going to be fun.
Oh, God.
Right, well, Matthew tells us, if it's without spoiling it, what on earth he's talking about. Because I'm pretty sure, is it what they show Joe? Because I can't remember that being a photo fit. They do show Joe something. Oh dear.
Oh, you
can't remember the story order. Brilliant.
Oh, that helps. Oh, that helps. Oh, that's brilliant.
So that's going to annoy Daniel now for the rest of the stream.
Yeah,
Kate and Steve are talking to Joe.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna have to just like that, folks. Daniel's gonna giggle for 5 minutes now, right? So Joe, which is funny because Joe's in this scene, the acting is really good as well, and he's literally breaking down because of all the stuff that it, like Daniel said, it's his past has sort of been seen again, and we sort of dug up again. This is a serious thing, Daniel.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Oh, here we go. He's calm now, folks. Okay. So this is where we did hear about there was somebody who did take them seriously.
This even so,
there was a social worker.
And his apparently, so apparently he's been victimized for voicing he's been victimized for voicing his concerns over various officers that has actually been involved in those interview. I'm trying to think of the right phrase, the whole interview. I had.
Yeah, it's a child's home, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And basically, this social worker called Oliver did take them seriously, did actually take an account, and was going to go to the police or was going to get this investigated. And he sort of said that he was another one who we thought was going to help us, and he just didn't. And we didn't hear back from him. He disappeared. So of course, if you watch Line of Duty, you should have a bell ringing now that this social worker disappeared after saying he was going to do something about this place.
But see, here's the point. There should have been a flashback scene for this, even so on character, because we still don't know. Because we still didn't see him disappearing or him voicing his concerns. There could have been an extra and it's tagged on. I think that helps.
I don't know, because I think you get what you need to from this, which is if anybody from the outside who tried to investigate, something not very good happened to them. He didn't look like Mr. Potato Head. That's a bit harsh.
I don't know where you get that
I know the thing he's referring to, because there was a photo of the social worker that basically they showed Joe.
Yeah, I know the bit he's referring to that. I don't get that.
How did he look like Mr. Potato Head? He had long hair.
No, yeah, it's just any typical sort of age. He's sort of early in, he's sort of and sort of like your or sort of
Yeah,
like,
he
do you
just
know
looked like
what I mean?
the sort of person you find in like a coffee bar and you wouldn't want to talk to. But at least we now know what he's talking about.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, on for that. Matthew, you're going to get me cancelled.
Oh no, you're already cancelled. You just don't know about it yet, Daniel.
Okay. Yeah.
Remember, I don't exist. I don't exist, mate. You're a sexist, horrible person.
And well, yeah, well, and yeah, well, I told you,
I am. I'm a mythical you. Like all your lovely fan club on Twitter don't acknowledge.
Oh yeah.
Hi, Chris. Hi, Chris Persia, King of Wrenches.
I'm such a popular person in that.
This stream's just going to descend into madness tonight. This is going to be fun.
Yeah.
We'll go from talking about really serious things that happened at the end of this episode to you just giggling like a madman. Because of Matthew.
Yeah. Oh god.
The key is this social worker. That's the key thing about this scene. And then Kate. This is when the letter comes back up, and Kate starts to connect some dots. Not letter, list. Because they look at the envelope.
And yeah, but I'd say it's most I'd say it's most you've connected the dots. She was just there.
She connects with what Danny said to her. Sorry, she connects when it comes to what Danny might have actually whispered to her. But basically, Steve sees that forensics hasn't looked at the envelope. And he flags that up immediately and is like, why is that not happened? That needed to happen. So he gets that sent off.
And so like they end up going to this sort of arena because they think this even so like I disappeared around to the voting arena.
Oh, you jumped loads.
Oh shit.
Yeah. No, it's okay. So basically, Steve says, let's get that tested. So we know that's going to come up later in the episode. But then they start to think they're basically. Kate says once Steve has told her about this, she goes, he might have not said listen to me. He might have said list. So now they're becoming aware that there's a possible list that Dot hid from. They obviously don't know Dot's connection yet, and they don't know for sure there's a list there, but they're starting to realise that there could be a list there. Now we have Denton having a bit of a reality check.
The whole social officer making it's a little bit wacky, and it's a little bit wacky, and it's a little bit wacky, and in here, and I think the woman behind the
I recognise her, yeah.
And I do recognise her, but I don't know where from. But
was she in Corrie or something? I want to say she was in Corrie or some sort of soap.
I think she's been in Corrie, but I also think she's been in Britain is as in and here one of the people from the far side are stereotyped better. But
You know better.
somebody tell us in the chat.
Yeah. So Denton just thinks she can waltz back into her job as a police officer. And the woman on the other side of it's like a job centre, isn't it? It's like a place where if you're an offender or you're trying to get back into work, you go. And she sort of nicely sort of says to her, you just need to get back into work. Sort of drop the hopes that you're going to just go back to what you were before this. And here's what's important. She didn't get cleared of everything. She still had a charge. The jury didn't completely clear her, just that she wasn't conspiracy. She had nothing to do with the murder, but she did conceal evidence. I can't remember the exact wording, but the lesser one, she still got charged with. So because of that, she cannot work for the police because she's technically got something on her record.
Yeah.
So that's sort of, it's sort of, and then when she says, Wendy, I agree. When she goes, well, I was a DA, I've got quite a good skill set, and then the next scene, it's like, oh, Lindsay.
Yeah, well, you actually do. I mean, you actually do feel a bit sorry for them though, in a sense, because it's a sense of how the mind you have them all, and because you have quite a high rated job in society as a detective of inspector, and for somebody to go kind of crashing down to a job and as still like more often up for wars and stuff like that. And a bit of an harsh reality check for somebody.
Yeah, and it's that theme with Denton's life that just when she thinks she's won, there's something always to put her back, like on the bottom. So this is very much that scene. And now we're back to Dot, and this envelope comes back up because he gets wind that it's getting tested. And he basically says to Maneep, not Maneep, what's her name?
PC, but and Gerard.
Yeah, you're right. So because I'm watching Doctor Who again, folks, so that's why Maneep came out.
I can't pronounce her name at all, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah, the officer who before is now working as like their sort of uniform officer that they'd have in AC-12. She basically gets put in a really awkward position because Steve says, let's get that tested. And then Dot comes sniffing like up to her, gets wind that the envelope's being tested. And he basically says to her, oh, keep this between us. Don't tell Steve that the results have come in. What's he said now?
I'm going to kill you.
Properly, Matthew. Properly. Yeah. So this is not once again showing he's trying to isolate Steve. He's trying to keep Steve out the loop as much as possible because he doesn't want him knowing the results because he knows that as soon as Steve gets these results, he's gonna just carry on and not stop. Because then it gets confirmed that because of the forensic test and the splatter, that there was a blood-stained list or note in the envelope.
But see, here's the thing, and I don't know what the issue was in this. You cannot, as you go back through the previous episodes, I don't really recall I don't really recall this to be that bad. ink to the
It was
thing.
stained enough. That's the whole point. There was enough blood on there.
Yeah. Mhm.
That, and forensics, like nowadays, when you hear about how they can get a tiny bit of DNA and they can like find all sorts. So I think you can sort of process that as, yeah, that would sort of, that's not too out the realms.
Yeah.
And now we get the man. Now we get Denton having another knock because she's living in like a hostel type of place. Was the vibe I was getting.
Yeah.
And this,
Yeah.
and this is when we get introduced to another character.
Oh yeah, the chaser of the Robin guy, and the reason why I after and the reason why I'm after here is because you never come across this Scottish guy with the name of Robin, because they're all just
Well, he arrives, doesn't he, in his like little suit. Well, not sort of suit, but it's like smart clothes. He's like, "Oh, I'm here from the, what was the term? Offender management service." That's what it was.
Yeah,
And he's sort of very nicey, saying like, "We're here to get you back on your feet. We're here to help you." But it very quickly turns into, "Oh, this guy's not up to. It's not up to what you think."
yeah, and I'm not, and I'm not actually going to see what he's suggesting to try and help and to try and help and, and find the answer way because YouTube will get me even more
Yeah, and
than
then Matthew will
already
probably have a
does.
comment about it, so best not. But it's very
Yeah,
it's very clear what he's alluding to when he's like,
yeah,
give us, like, you help me out and I'll help you. That's the most nice way to put it.
yeah,
And Denton tells him to basically shove off and sends him away.
yeah.
Now we have a Ted scene, actually, back to Ted.
Oh yeah, because he's been Jaguar out from you and out from you and that's again very well. It
Well, no,
um
it's very interesting because this has sort of been hinted at that she likes Ted, or Ted likes her, and that there's a bit of something between them. So this is what he said. Matthew, I'm trying to get through a stream with that one. I can't point.
oh good God.
Oh dear me.
Oh my God, I'm sorry.
We're supposed to be professionals. We're supposed to be professionals, folks. That's quickly gone out the window. Oh yeah, so she also pushes the Steve angle again because she
Yeah,
basically says you need to sack him again, so that's more pressure.
yeah,
And they do have a kiss at the end.
yeah, that's in the next MC. Oh,
Well, like I said,
God.
Ted defends Steve, and she's pushing, and then they get home after their date, and they have a bit of a kiss, and you think, oh, something's going to happen. But Ted, basically, that guilty conscience that we were
Yeah,
talking
it's
about.
the whole sort of, and it's the whole sort of give house things it gives because you can tell it takes his real and Jim and series. Huh?
Yeah, and I think it's also he's of a different generation, where if you're gonna be married or do anything, you fully sort of were committed even after the fact. And she even points out that you're separated. But he says, no, I
Yeah,
said those vows. So he's very sort of, and this is one of the really nice aspects to Ted's character, that he's very
yeah,
loyal and he's very sort of strong in that when he commits to something, and you can't help but admire that, I think, a bit in Ted as a sort of characteristic. So now we go back to Sam. That we have had a few scenes with Sam and Steve, and you can tell they're a bit tense with each other because of Denton.
But she comes across as they're both human beings. Oh, and I'll get to that as the series progresses. She comes across as really cool, nice little.
Well, she comes across as not very, like I said, it's just what we were saying. This episode could have been subtitled "Everybody Hates Steve," because she's another one that it's like you can just see she's gradually getting more fed up with him. She's sort of not happy, but she does do something for him here because, sorry folks, messenger beep. She does do something that Steve needs her to do because she's Murder Squad. So she basically uses that to say that there's a link with Hunter when it comes to Murphy, and that he got interviewed in regards to Hunter. And Steve's like, that wasn't in the file. So that's another.
But we kind of get to that as we go on, because that gets stuff on as to who and who I feel like later on in the series. Like spoiling for you, but you've already seen who and you already seen who the officer was and interviewed halfway in the past and series. So yeah.
But it's that hint again of there's this. It's not even a hint. It's like there's just overriding feeling of somebody up high or people up high have been interfering the whole way along with this Murphy or Hunter or this whole sort of circle of people. There's been somebody involved somehow, and this is just, like I said, more hints. So Steve goes to probably the last person you would think once he knows this. I remember watching this the first time and being very surprised what happens next.
Oh yeah, he goes to see, and he goes to see,
and that's as pleasant as you would as you can guess. It ends up being.
And so she basically asks him, "Are you opening my face?" And he's like, "What can you tell me?" And um, um, what can you tell me on Ronan Muck? On Ronan Muck? If you get any information.
Yeah, and it's sort of, you can tell he doesn't want to go to her, but he's banking on her desperation that she will tell him because she's so desperate.
Yeah.
And this is sort of one of the few weaknesses Denton does have. That this is something that you can tell you can get to her with. You can sort of get her a bit more inside if you focus on this aspect. And Steve knows this. So he's sort of playing on that very heavily, I think, just to go to her in the first place. And then you get a scene which just adds to Steve's lovely time in this episode. Next.
Is it the scene? Yes. Oh yeah, because they go post it and have you what's his face again? The former.
Nige.
Oh yeah.
So basically, he brings this link with Tommy and this stuff, and also to add to the feeling which this episode's building on, when they say to him, "How do you know this information?" He says, "I can't say." So once again, he's keeping them out. He's not helping himself whatsoever. He's sort of giving them reasons to mistrust him at this point, almost. And then because of that, Ted basically sidelines him and says, Dot and Kate, you can go and do this interview, you can do the investigation. Steve's sort of left as a spare part almost.
Yeah, so I just until we get to the whole order, like for the name on the department, it's gathers and kind of stickers each for the office, and so the way that says new and that says something new within the force.
Yeah, and it's that sort of theme with Nigel that he always seems to land on his feet, doesn't he? He always seems to get the nice jobs, and he sort of has said that's what he seems to specialise in, sort of not doing too much, just doing enough to keep in the job and get rewarded for it. Because they now know that the caddy, that the name he gave, that Dot made him give, they now realise the caddy's not dead. It wasn't that bloke. The actual caddy's still about, and they need to find him. So you can see for Dot's case, once again, he's not stopped them. He just bought himself a bit more time, and they're back to the theme of that the caddy's a real thing. So obviously they have to say to Nige, why did you give that account? It's false. And like the whole scene, he's looking at Dot like, what have you done? Like, you told me this was finished.
I'm thinking deep down to this in the card, David, and it's never really explained into that he that he knew that after but something tells me that he knew that Cotton was the card.
I think he knew not to trust him. I don't know if he knew he was the caddy. I think Nige, it's almost they're too similar, him and Dot. When it comes to personality, so they just naturally don't like each other. And you sort of see that he's all smart. Well, not smart because it's Nigel, but he's sort of because Kate's there and she's sort of giving him attitude back, and he's like, "Oh, I don't know," and then
and you get them on until the other smiles is a measure of human being that to have smiles.
And that's saying a lot because Daniel's saying this, folks.
Yeah.
So, but the interesting it's what happens after, because obviously him and Nige and Dot then have their own scene afterwards where they're a bit more honest with each other.
Yeah. And you get some also like you need to shut this and you need to shut this out because it's going to eventually lead to him getting dragged back in.
Yeah, when you can see he's sort of saying this is getting too much. It was too much before, but they're gonna find you out. That's the vibe. Yeah, I think he's trying to sort of. He's not doing this out of the goodness of his heart. He's basically saying we're both gonna go down if you don't stop this.
Yeah.
And then you have an interesting bit where they're basically threatening each other with Nige saying I've got this against like to work in my favour, and Dot saying well I've got this, and it's like who can. It's almost a bit of a contest, isn't it? Of who can make the other blink between the two of them. Yeah, it's like cat and mouse, Matthew. It is. It's very who's going to win. You're sort of almost thinking out of this.
But see, it's being a contrast because in the beginning of the show, you are sort of you two are sort of pal pal being friends, but they're winning. I did that almost tell. Like I'm gonna stab you in the back fast. This on. Basically.
Yeah, it's but that's the thing. It's who can stab who first, almost, isn't it? At this point, but they do manage to agree, or Dot manages to. It appears to get him to agree to come in, Nige, and amend his statement, and sort of say, "Oh, I didn't really mean it was him," like that sort of vibe.
Yeah.
So that's what happens. We now get Nige coming back for interview.
I'm sorry for the idiot in the chat.
Yeah, don't
Oh, yeah.
So now we have this Nige coming back to AC12.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he gets and so he gets into a view where it's unfair and it's voluntary, so he goes to amend this and statement and holds Jeremy Cole being caddy and he goes to changes and statement because I gets dragged back up again.
And he keeps, which I found quite funny, the line at the end almost that every reply is, "I'm deeply regretful." What does he say? Oh, with deep remote. Oh, he says it a few times, and it's very sort of almost sarcastic.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm really sorry. He sort of says repeatedly.
He says, "I'm very remorseful." That was the one.
So it becomes a bit almost comical by the end because of what we know as the audience at this moment.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But Dot is very much, as soon as he's got what he needs out of Nige, Dot stops the interview as well, and I think that makes Kate sort of stand, actually notice for once something's not quite right here.
But he gives a name the artist Arnold I that kill Aubrey and even the whole the key said is that he gave him the whole sort of story, the catfish Arnold. But the problem is Artist Arnold can't get questioned on that because he's getting moonshot or something. So when he pulls up Orton further and then Kirkwood Orton, so like his heart's in the right and his heart's in the right and he's overall look at the
and Kate reluctantly backs off. But at least you're starting to see Kate. I think this is the first time she's questioned Dot, or she's starting to sense that there's something not quite right with Dot. And this is the sort of theme that the more he's having to lie, the more he's trying to elaborately construct these things to protect him, the more he's looking suspect, even if they don't quite click yet. Ted and Kate, who they're dealing with, it's starting now. I think to little alarm bells maybe are starting to pop up, which is good. So now we're back to Denton and the offender management person.
So Kevin, if he asked them, is what we're going to.
I like that.
No, but yes.
Oh no, he is. Especially because what he does in this scene.
And so if he asked them Robin and so Robin comes back and he asks and he says to I hear you've been absent from home. His accent's a lot and given my accent, but believe it or not, it is actually the Stuart. And,
They do
and
exist,
it is
people
actually,
more Scottish than Daniel.
yeah. So, like, even I can't do a good impression of it, the enemy. And he says, I hear you've been absent from, and I hear you've been absent from, and I hear you've been absent from, okay, from, okay, we can't, and we can't afford to lose that jigger of, and he says, and kill it.
Well,
If you get that,
Denton then looks at him and she says,
mhm,
20 quid.
yeah,
And you think, like, what's going on? Denton's not the type to just sort of let this happen to her. And then you
yeah,
see exactly why she's saying this in like as soon as she starts doing what he thinks he's gonna get. Let's put it that way.
and then she just punches him like, oh,
Then we see Psycho Denton again because she just goes like to town on this creepy guy, like Daniel said.
yeah,
Like he didn't expect it coming, and he's just utterly sort of beaten up. And I'm not
yeah,
gonna lie, in that moment, out of even though Denton's done horrible things, you're
yeah,
fully with her in that moment. You'll be like, yeah, go for it, like go berserk, because you get the vibe as well that this isn't the first time. Oh God, I've not seen. Yeah,
oh God, Matthew. Oh, you put a,
luckily they didn't show a lot of it, so you've just got the guy's reaction, but you're
no,
fully with her in this moment.
um, but it's last sort of extra gets in is like, oh, for Christ's sake, my speaker hot. No,
Well, he's literally on the
that kid is
floor.
going out the door, yeah.
Well, like I said, it's sort of almost comical by then because he's literally on the floor.
Yeah,
And then she's just kicking him out the door. But before that, we've skipped a bit. She recorded this and
oh
basically
yeah,
like holds on to him, shows
yeah,
him the camera, and he's like, "I've got this on tape. Like
yeah,
you can't touch me now."
yeah.
So yeah, it's that. Oh, dear. I should have thought watching this like Matthew was going to have so much fun in our chat. Like I didn't click, but now I know.
Oh,
So
jeez. Oh, Jesus, I'm so sorry. It can't, but it's just my. I should
I
have
know we
known.
love it.
I should have came prepared. I should have came prepared. Not for my future. And then you can't show the point me off. Oh, I'm so.
And that's a rarity. So well done, Matthew.
Yeah.
But
Then,
it's nice to see Daniel laughing on stream like he is.
yeah.
So now we go back to the social worker because they've done an autopsy on his body.
Yeah. So they, so one for women and 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 decide to try and abuse some of the officers that were around at that time that the only officer they could track down is the Patrick Fairbank guy who's um he was the chief superintendent, but he ran ICE and a couple of eh,
Well, the reason
kids.
they sort of zoom in
Yeah.
on Fairbanks is
Mm-hmm.
he's for his rank, he shouldn't have been signing off on a report of just a suicide sort of victim. It didn't make sense that this report would be sent to him, let alone he would sign
Yeah.
off. So they sort of instantly focus in on that name, almost because it doesn't make sense. Why on earth would this be of any interest to him, this social worker?
Yeah.
But they also find in the autopsy that the original verdict was suicide. But their autopsy, it's blatantly that this guy was beaten and that it was a murder.
Yeah.
So that's also another layer to it was covered up as a suicide, but now it's not. But then we do get Fairbanks, sort of this is the introduction of Fairbanks very much. Because they find another link that makes them even more suspicious of Fairbanks, don't they?
Oh, yeah, because he's pictured in various articles next to the watch and council of the council of the watch guy, because it's heavily implied that he had a friendship, basically.
Yeah, and as we know, Roach had that link with Sandsview, and he can't talk because of his state. So Fairbanks is very much the next person that they can talk to who's alive, who hasn't got a medical issue. So they obviously have to go to Ted to basically say, "Can we go and interview him?" And he lets them, but you can see there's a bit of he's not happy, but you think that's more because of rank, because of what Fairbanks was in the job before he retired.
And like there's another reason to that I'm going to come with the handshake, because when I remember,
well, just the way the interview happens is odd, but Arnott gets the final sort of clue. So they interview him, and he's very welcoming, isn't he? He's very like, "Oh, can I get you something to drink?" And they start to basically say, "Do you remember Oliver, the social worker?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't have a clue. Like, it was years ago." That's sort of his defense, isn't it? And then they ask him about Roach, and he denies that.
But it can be Indian and when it gets in the earphone of uncles and say and cousins it difference and he calls it and or something, did you know?
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Yeah.
No, I didn't notice that.
Because,
oh yeah, and they do make a show that Wendy, he's very well off, isn't he? He's done well from his job, let's put it that way.
Yeah. And because he said, I've never, because I've never even did this, and this, and the police and thinking, I should have been a one in the month of each case is convenient or him as per the announced to the email the home office.
Yeah, but it's what happens next. They're like mid-interview, and then you hear a knock on the door.
And let's see, and then let's see, and the hand and a handshake, the earbanks and the sonics, you have handshake, so you
well, you don't know that yet, but you do see they do. It's not a normal handshake. I think people you'll click that, but it's more that what he says afterwards, where he basically says, "Thanks for phoning me to tell me that you were coming." So basically, Ted's gone behind Kate and Steve's back to warn him. That's the vibe I'm getting, and I think that's very clear. I think that's what they're saying with that line of dialogue. It's he warned him that something was going to happen.
Actually, that's a pretty good point. Actually, it's a pretty good point, Matthew. They can actually come up with some really good points, and yet it's kind of like I never really thought about that up until you mentioned it. Yeah, but I suppose It's kind of like,
Yeah, and then when they come back, Steve gets Kate to one side and says, that was a Masonic handshake. And even though we know that redacted file came from Jill, they know they think it's come from Ted. So they also Steve also points out that file that was redacted and didn't have the right information in came from Hastings. So you're starting to see now doubt, especially in Steve, that he's starting to have doubts about Ted, and he's starting to think maybe Ted's got a bit more involvement.
Yeah.
And then the next scene is it's sort of Dot's big sort of shot in the episode. What Dot does next?
Oh yeah, he shows the PowerPoint, to all the high ranked officers, and it's like in this sort of it's like in this sort of high ranks, and even with your Orton's doing the presentation about the Canadian, he brother ends up hunt or and he brother ends up harrying his presentation, and he brother ends up with the final points, but he makes an indication, makes an indication to Hastings that the idea is actually on.
Well, if you look at the profile, it does fit Steve. That's the thing. It's male, under 35. That accent point, which is what we said in Harry's interview, it would come back up. Counter-terror, which is it's very clearly, that's, I think, the major thing that's telling you that he's pointing sort of his aim at Steve here. And a detective. So he's basically handcrafted this profile perfectly at this point. And it's sort of, and Ted, even you can see he's starting now to sort of give Steve double looks. Because the shot is like, it's a bit blatant, but the camera work is even saying like he's looking at him through the blinds, isn't he? And it's very clear what they're trying to say without saying it. And then we've got one more scene which is important, which is the ending scene.
I sort of seen that Orton's going to kill Orton.
Well, he has a gun. That's the main thing. He's packing. And they have their meetup because Nige has done his side of the bargain. He did change his statement, so now it's time for Dot to sort of show his hand.
And so he says to him, I've made this club.
That's basically been Nigel's leverage. They're handing over each other's leverage in this, and he does it. And I think it's a very interesting moment because he hugs him.
And you think, right, he's going to pull the trigger again, I think because there's a moment there, Orton has the answer, you think, right, because when the two of them are giving each other a hug, though, you think, right, this is the moment where he's going to pull the gun on him, basically.
Yeah, but I think if you look at, and this is also Craig's acting once again, if you look at his face when he's doing it, I think this is relief that he's not had to use that gun. and that he's hugging him literally. And I think this is actually a bit of the true Dot. One of the rare times we see it where he's utterly relieved, and that it's a genuine hug. I think by the end of it, because he doesn't want to shoot Nige, and it was very much a last resort. Is the vibe you get?
And yeah, but it, but it turns out that it's not and it's not the card that Orton expects to get.
Well, he burns it, doesn't he? Thinking I've got it now.
Yeah.
And then you've got the final like clincher like moment that this series is known for, which is there's the real phone by the looks of it in Nigel's car, and he gave him a fake.
Yeah.
So it was all, and that's the thing. This is just more proof that Nigel, I think, is probably one of the most slippy, nasty pieces of work in this whole series. That even when he could have given Dot that card, that SIM card, he just had to have that. He couldn't do it. He couldn't let him win. There had to be that final bit that he just kept on to. And I think that says a lot about Nigel's character.
So that's the episode, guys. And on if there were parts of that where this I think that my view is on top, or when I just didn't. So.
Hi, PJ. Sorry, meant to say hi. Yeah. Well, yeah, and like I said, we like seeing you giggle.
So how does everybody rate that?
Yeah, so if you can put your scores in the chat, and then we'll show them while we're sort of saying our scores.
Yeah. So Charlotte, we'll start with the mold. And so we'll start with the mold. He's us to what you giving it.
Yeah, like I said, I think this is it's really clever character work. You can sort of buy Steve when it comes to just giving everybody reasons to not trust him. I think that's important because I think otherwise it would have felt a little bit unbelievable that they would all be this quick to doubt him. But he does do legitimate things in this episode, which you just think, oh, Steve, you're not helping yourself. And that's the thing, though, they all make sense for Steve to act that way, though. He's not acting out of character. He is that stubborn. He does have that tendency to sort of do his own thing and not tell people. I like the Ted also development. I think that they've been hinting at this thing with him and Jill, and you're actually starting to see some of that now happen. And I think Jill actually is becoming very interesting. Someone who you might have not sort of paid a lot of attention to, and I think this episode makes you pay attention to her.
She gets more interesting in the last two episodes.
Yeah, so I like Jill, sort of her character development. Dot, like we said, he was so powerful last episode. He was sort of at the top, sort of everything was in control. He'd done that brilliant trick of making them all believe he was the hero. And once again, you're starting to see that crumble. Not fully. He still has got them on his side, but with Nigel outplaying him at the end, and with that moment with Kate, having that just second of doubt, you're starting to see his sort of power crack. And trying to think. Oh yeah, and I think that's the main thing, because sort of we do learn a little bit more to do with the boys' home, but that isn't as in the forefront this episode, and I think that's a good way to do it. That was so heavy last week. I think they needed a character of the main three, and also Dot, I think by extension, needed this episode. So I'll give this a 9 because it's not quite 10. Because I know I love the finale for this series. I'll let people know that now. It's one of my favourite sort of endings of a series, this one. So I'll keep it 9 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually agree with, I'm gonna actually agree with, I think Charlotte, no, you said that, I can't remember all, and all who gives it a nine, Matthew gives it a nine, and he's usually the orc, up, so I am have asked my, ask how basically we had to the people using Sadak who did the devs and eight. So
From
yeah,
memory. So, because
and
Sudoku God Love Him watched like the whole thing in a week is the vibe. Is the vibe I'm getting. So he's probably having to remember
oh
some of these
god,
last episodes.
and yeah, but I just said but as we both said to get a good character development and art in although although there's a bit in the next episode that really really was Oyuma Pasaba in the next episode then and it's about on to the verso I get to see we never go on with it that they have to have that whole sort of um and that whole sort of reference and they'll you get what the story is under the series, but in the next episode to get that really horrible bit to aches my end out of the episode a bit. So yeah, well,
So I
and
think we'll have a very interesting stream. Let's put it that way. Next
mm-hmm,
episode, and in the chat, we'd love to. You're usually so good at telling us what you think, but next week we really would love to hear what you guys think in the chat, just to see different perspectives.
yeah, because that kind of yeah, cause that yeah, cause that kind of annoy me a bit. No, once it kind of the better so so yeah, so put all the probably not attending next week because I'll be taking a couple hours off that episode, but which is a shame because there isn't good. I'm I'm often the next episode, but like I have to be honest and make a couple hours off the next of the year.
Yeah. So what did you think of this episode? Because it's now time for your score.
Yes, and yeah, Eva and said, I'm a basic kid, I'm a basic kid. He said, I get Eva from
Oh yeah, so 9 out of 10.
mm-hmm. So yeah, I said, big character development and good acting and in case you will, the guy, I get people, and the guy that people need and the offender management officer what and creepy bastard and
He played his part very well. It wasn't a nice part, but he played it well.
yeah, never trust um and never trust the guy called the Robin very
Oh, it's just
yes
Robin. I thought it was a Scottish person called Robin, but it's just Robin. Then.
well yeah well
You learn something new every
yeah
day, folks. Sorry if
yeah
anybody
well
listening to this is called Robin. With disclaimer, sorry. We don't think you're all creepy people. Just Daniel appears to not like that name for some reason.
personal experience because I've known a couple of people from Grenoble and they do come repeating that theory still stands. Right, someone make sure to like, share, subscribe, and make sure to like, share, subscribe, turn the bell on so that you get all the notifications as to when the next stream or whatever the hell are up to.
Yes, because Daniel does do his own little videos now. So when we're not streaming, when we're in our little breaks, remember to keep an eye out for those when they do pop up, because Daniel is enjoying actually doing those little sort of one topic streams.
Also, make sure and subscribe for everything on this channel. Hopefully I'm not answering because I'm laughing at Matthew's jokes in the chat, and then today I'll apologize again for and for the hilarity. It's very the other I just bust out with laughing and just but there you go. So thanks to everybody in the chat. Thanks for everybody in the chat. Yeah, I'll always be streaming. I've got some artwork to like my ass if I decide to stop streaming. So yeah, thanks for on this report. And here is the channel trailer. If I can find it.
If Daniel presses the right button and it actually works. So good night, folks. Unless you see us again, because Daniel's messed up the trailer.
And hashtag cancel Matthew. And hold up on a minute. You've not actually if you're outside whose channel here appearing on before the trailer of whose channel you appearing on because you get up in channels that you're appearing on. So
yeah, people are crazy and they ask me to go on their streams. So I'm a regular on the Spacebook Dan, who's also lovely. So I might, and just for you guys, I might be reviewing series 13 for him. So watch out for those. Otherwise, I'm usually live on Thursday with that crazy gang. And also the TARDIS Zone, I'll be doing, if hopefully New Who, Classic Who, One William Hartnell tomorrow. So if you want to watch a bit of classic and listen to us all natter along, that'll be tomorrow. And those are the ones. Oh, and Sanctuary of Geeks, I popped on Monday because he was talking about the Flux episode 1. So I'll give a shout out to Paul. Sanctuary of Geeks.
Yeah, and you can always catch me in this channel. You can actually and you can actually catch me in the Dalek graveyard known as I can't realize people actually of me and of me on that platform.
You've got your own fan club. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Right, so here's the channel trailer. Have a great weekend, guys, and I'll see you next for the